Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and we are going to be talking about the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator situation. It is just getting started. I did not even know that Vic Fangio had left the team until about halfway through the second day of my vacation. I was given the opportunity to go on Icon of the Seas, Royal Caribbean's greatest and largest cruise ship, the inaugural cruise. It was an amazing experience. I will go ahead and say that. Had a fantastic time with my fiance and my family as well. They were also there, thanks to my brother being associated, in a sense, with Mr. Beast. So that, in and of itself, was a fantastic experience. I'm glad I was able to have the time off, very relaxing. But even as I was on that ship, enjoying myself, the incredible experience that was the Royal Caribbean cruise on Icon of the Seas, all that time, I was still thinking to myself, everything that was going on with these Miami Dolphins, I'm trying to collect my thoughts and figure out what exactly do I feel about this. The Miami Dolphins parted ways mutually, or so we're told, with Vic Fangio, and almost immediately he went and signed a contract with the Philadelphia Eagles to be the defensive coordinator. Now, the fact that that happened so quickly, the fact that it happened just in the blink of an eye, just he was with the Dolphins, he was on their staff, and then literally 10 minutes later, it felt like he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. How long had that been in the works? How long had that been even a point of discussion? Regardless of whether the Dolphins let Fangio leave or not, it feels like it should be irrelevant. This feels like the same situation where I remember that the Philadelphia Eagles were getting in trouble with the whole tampering situation, and that was the whole reason why the Miami Dolphins ended up getting Fangio for 1 year in the first place. And now here we are, and we're looking at things the same way again. Has that contract that Vic Fangio just signed been sitting there in a drawer somewhere waiting for the dotted line? They just went ahead and just copied and pasted everything and just said, here you go, it's the same contract from before that we were going to give you before you joined Miami. If that is the case, then either way, it just feels like it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't. I feel like the Miami Dolphins, for all the times that they've been punished because of this reason or that reason, whether it's the bully gate, whether it's the tampering with Tom Brady, whether it's anything along those lines, at what point do the Dolphins get to be on the receiving end of some sort of NFL charity, as it were? I'm going to get into everything that I feel about this Vic Fangio situation in a moment. But first, just want to go ahead and mention, as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is a revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues, whether that is the NFL, the NBA, or the MLB, one of each. It is up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday special, you can get your money back if you lose, or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you are any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code 5, that's F-I-V-E, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, promo code 5, F-I-V-E. Go to PrizePicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with and get started winning today. This show is also affiliate sponsored by My Nintendo Store. Just use the links in the description below to be able to purchase Super Mario RPG or Super Mario Bros. Wonder to get yourself some bonus items upon making your purchase. So again, just click the links in the description below and you'll be able to get those bonus items that we were talking about. Make sure you get in there and enjoy My Nintendo Store, the best and easiest way to the world of Nintendo. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just kind of look back on how I felt about the whole Vic Fangio experience, as it were. I know about his reputation. I know that he was considered by many to be one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. The modern NFL just basically took whatever it was that he did and tried to use and put their own spin on it to make it so that it would be Vic Fangio-esque, but at least then you'll be able to say, well, this is my version of it. Okay, that's fine. So the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel went ahead and said, we want to get the original godfather behind the scheme that pretty much every single defense in the NFL strives to be. Okay, cool. That's great. That looks great for me. I was very excited when the Dolphins finally got their hands on him. I thought that this was going to be the start of an amazing defense. And to his credit, as soon as Jaylen Ramsey got in there, the defense took a major step forward. It looked very frustrating. We were mad at Vic Fangio. We were saying this is supposed to be the defensive guru who's basically set the tone for the entire NFL's version of defense. And meanwhile, the Dolphins look awful on defense. So what's going on? We were mad at him. I was mad at him. I remember a good friend Manny, who, by the way, I don't know how he feels about this right now because, quite frankly, he's now going to be having Vic Fangio as his defensive coordinator since he is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. So, ironic in that. But he was the one telling me, it's like, listen, man, Vic Fangio is Vic Fangio still. Just give him some time to work with what he's got, get the players that he needs to make the scheme work, and he'll make it all work. Okay, cool. Great. As soon as Jaylen Ramsey got there, everything seemed to work a whole lot better. But there is one thing, and this is something very interesting that I cannot help but notice. There is one thing about Vic Fangio that really did bother me, and it was that he was annoyingly stubborn. And I don't know if this is just a standard thing for most NFL coaches, particularly ones on the older side. Everybody seems to think that their way is best and nobody can tell them what to do. And even if the players think, hey, maybe we should try doing this, the coach is going to say, no, we're going to do it this way because I said so. That kind of mentality, I don't know if that works anymore. I really don't. You look at Dan Campbell, right, of the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell is hard-nosed. Yes, he is very tough. He's very much a physical style of football kind of coach. That's what he wants the Detroit Lions to be. But he's also a player's coach. The players love him. The players will go through walls for him. He's the kind of guy who can... The thing is, he can also run through the wall himself, so that also is a point in his favor. Vic Fangio, on the other hand, he's definitely he has a great reputation. He's very smart. He knows a lot about NFL defense. But here's the thing that I can't help but notice, and this is just going off of reports that we've been hearing as of late. A lot of players didn't like Vic Fangio, and apparently that included one Jaylen Ramsey. The reports were that we were hearing was that Ramsey was not particularly thrilled with the idea of not being able to shadow the other team's best wide receiver. Jaylen Ramsey wanted to play man. He wants to play up in the guy's face. He wants to be the number one cornerback that he knows that he is. Okay, I can respect that. No problem there. As a matter of fact, we were clamoring for that for a very long time, basically saying, you know what? We want you to do this. I don't know why Vic Fangio isn't letting you do this, so what's the deal? Another thing that we were very frustrated about was the fact that Cam Smith, our second-round draft pick that everybody was so high on and thought was going to be something incredible, in preseason, he looked good. In training camp, he looked fantastic. And then the regular season comes along, and Cam Smith barely sees the field, if at all, aside from special teams. That's literally the only reason. Vic Fangio decided to put his faith in the likes of Eli Apple before putting Cam Smith out there. He went Eli Apple over even Nick Needham, who we know Nick Needham can play, so what's the deal there? Very weird sort of situation there. And I don't understand why these coaches, they just have their guys that they like. Fine. You guys, you have your own personal thoughts on the whole thing. You're Vic Fangio. You've earned the right, the benefit of the doubt, I guess. But that doesn't excuse when players end up not liking you. If players don't like you, it is usually because you have done something that most of the locker room is not a fan of. That's the thing about Butch Barry, that so many people were looking at him and like, okay, nobody in Denver likes you. What did you do exactly? What did you do wrong? And maybe, in this case, it wasn't anything that Butch Barry did specifically to the whole locker room. Maybe it was just a few malcontents that just didn't like him specifically, because he gets to Miami and Butch Barry is suddenly the guru of the offensive line for Miami. Now, mind you, the offensive line did better, not great. We have to keep in mind the fact that Tua had only 2 seconds to throw the football on a regular basis. That was just how the offense functioned, for better or worse. So it wasn't like the offensive line had a lot of pressure to perform. We will see if Butch Barry can get them coached up to the point where if Tua needs more than 2 seconds to throw a football, we will have more confidence that they'll actually be able to get the job done. But in Vic Fangio's case, he seemed to manage to piss off Jaylen Ramsey. He seemed to piss off Cam Smith. And apparently Javon Holland wasn't a big fan of him either. If you go to their Twitter accounts, right, shortly after the departure of Vic Fangio, Cam Smith put out just one emoji. That's all it was, just one little emoji, and it was an unlocked lock, okay? It was just a lock that is no longer locked. It is unlocked. So think of that. We all love to play this game of what does this actually mean? What are we reading into this? In many cases, and some people believe this, and quite frankly, I believe it too, because Cam Smith did look very good, and I don't know why Vic Fangio didn't use him. I believe that Cam Smith is happy that Fangio is gone because he wants to be able to be given an opportunity to show that he can play, in spite of the fact that he is a young player. He's not a 5, 6, 7 year vested veteran who has this wily veteran status that Eli Apple apparently had. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't understand the love for Eli Apple. I really don't. So Cam Smith is basically saying, okay, now you're going to get to see the real me. Cool, great. Then there was Javon Holland. And Javon Holland posted a GIF of someone kicking rocks. Now, for those of you who do not know what that means, kicking rocks means that you can even Google this. It's an impolite way to tell someone to go away or leave. It refers to someone kicking a rock ahead of them as they walk down the road. That tweet took place, again, shortly after the departure of Vic Fangio. Do you think that Javon Holland is losing any sleep over the idea that Vic Fangio is not going to be in Miami anymore? We noticed a distinct drop-off in Javon Holland's performance this season. I don't know if that has anything to do with the scheme. I don't know if that had more to do with the fact that his knees were not right. That probably had a lot to do with it, I think. But either way, you just get this distinct impression that Javon Holland wanted somebody else other than Vic Fangio to be running the defense, for better or worse. And then we finally get the pièce de résistance, Drew Rosenhaus, the NFL's most prestigious agent at this point. He goes on an interview and puts it on record that there were quite a few players in the Dolphins locker room that did not particularly get along with Vic Fangio. And not necessarily because of his coaching ability, not necessarily because what he was teaching was incorrect or inconvenient per se. It just didn't, the personalities clashed. And if personalities clashed, really, it doesn't really matter how good you are. It ultimately isn't going to work out. I remember when Reggie Wayne signed with the New England Patriots, and he was going to be engrossed by the Patriot way. He was going to become the next veteran wide receiver who was going to be able to revive his career with Tom Brady. Reggie Wayne got out of there so fast that it was almost impossible to fathom. He didn't like the Patriot way. He hated the culture in New England, and it didn't work for him. Chad Johnson, or Ocho Cinco, depending on how you want to call him, he was a Patriot very briefly, and it didn't work for him either. He barely played. He did not buy into the culture of whatever Bill Belichick and Tom Brady were putting out there. It didn't work for him. They tried. It didn't work. So in this case, you have Vic Fangio on defense, and it just looks like the defensive players are not particularly thrilled with Vic Fangio as a personality. And if that's the case, then maybe it really is for the best that Miami moves on and tries to find somebody else. So far, we've had an interview with Brandon Staley, the former Chargers head coach. And a lot of people are looking at him thinking, okay, we don't really want anything to do with you. We've seen what your teams look like. They don't play defense very well. Keep in mind, him getting hired as a head coach, he had to have something that he can put on his resume that says, this is why I deserve to be a head coach. In 2020, Brandon Staley was the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams with Sean McVay. He managed to have some really good players on that squad, I know. He had Aaron Donald. He had Jaylen Ramsey. There was even a younger Leonard Floyd on that squad. So there were plenty of players for the Rams to be able to utilize. And Brandon Staley used all of them to the best of his ability. And in 1 year, he became the head coach for the Chargers. And who can blame them? After all, you had the best defense. You ran the best defense in the NFL in a Super Bowl winning year for that same team. Why wouldn't you want to be the next head coach for a team? Unfortunately, with the Chargers, things did not go so well for him. And the funny thing, though, is that we're going to talk about players and them vouching for people. Jaylen Ramsey, again, who played under Staley when he was with the Rams, came out and basically said, listen, just because it didn't work out for one person at one place does not necessarily mean it won't work out for somebody with another place. Now, that is on the tail end of Brandon Staley's tenure as the Chargers head coach. But Jaylen Ramsey himself, he came out and said, again, you notice how much Jaylen Ramsey is being vocal about this whole thing, which I don't mind so much as long as he's not saying anything terrible. Jaylen Ramsey basically came out and said, listen, just because it didn't work out for you in one place does not mean it will not work out for you somewhere else. Jaylen Ramsey played under Staley with the Rams. He knows, and I think he understands, that sometimes things don't work out for players in one place, and the same thing goes for coaches. Dan Campbell, he had to go to the New Orleans Saints, coach under Sean Payton for a little while. Now he's the head coach of the Detroit Lions, and as I am recording this, he is on the fast track to not just having the Detroit Lions hadn't won a playoff game in over 2 decades, and now all of a sudden, they're about to go to the Super Bowl. And given how things are going, there is a distinct possibility. There's a distinct possibility the Lions could beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. That's very crazy. You went from a team that hadn't won a playoff game in over 20 years, and now you might win the Super Bowl. That's a lot of Dan Campbell. That's a lot of just raw physicality, just players wanting to play for you. And not only that, you knowing and adapting to what it is that they want to be able to do. The players know what they're good at. The players know what they're good at. And if you can make a scheme that allows them to shine the brightest at an individual level, you will find yourself a fantastic defense. I truly believe that. And the same thing goes for the offense. Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle for the Miami Dolphins, speed is their game. And Mike McDaniel tried to make a scheme that basically made it so that, listen, we have all this speed, let's use it to the best of our ability and make it so that all you have to do is get to this spot and Tua will get the ball there. It worked in many ways last season. It was a phenomenal experience to watch when it was working. Then when teams adapted and they were able to make it so that we couldn't rely on Tyreek and Jaylen Waddle the whole way, Mike McDaniel just did not adapt to the new style. He didn't try to make it so that, okay, well, now we have to do something different instead. Is it because he did not have the capability of doing so? Is it because he didn't want to? That's something we're going to have to see going forward. But if I'm the Miami Dolphins, the next defensive coordinator that they have to pick up, I don't think the best thing for Miami at this point is somebody who is like an old, grizzled veteran who's been a head coach before and Mike McDaniel can learn from the experience. Understand something. Any grizzled veterans that McDaniel brings in as a defensive coordinator, if we would not want them as our head coach, why would we want them to be mentoring McDaniel as a head coach? Think about that for a second. Because we keep hearing about this, right? We see Ron Rivera. Do you think anybody wants Ron Rivera as their head coach right now? I don't think anybody does. So because I keep seeing articles and I keep seeing podcasts talking about, oh, Ron Rivera has head coaching experience. He'll be able to teach Mike McDaniel based on his experience what it is that he needs to do as head coach. Do you want Mike McDaniel to take on the habits of Ron Rivera? Do you want Mike McDaniel to take on the habits of any other old head coach that has already tried and failed? I know that it just seems paradoxical because I just said in just a few breaths ago that coaches can learn from their experiences, and maybe just because it doesn't work in one place, it won't necessarily be the same way for them in another place. But at the same time, if you think that they are a bad head coach and you don't think that they have any business being a head coach, why would you want them to teach your young head coach who already has shown that there is some promise there? Think about this. If Miami, let's say Frank Smith ends up getting hired somewhere to be a head coach somewhere. There's a couple slots left. Let's say that Frank Smith ends up getting a role, right? If that happens, do you want Adam Gase to come out of nowhere and try to teach Mike McDaniel, this is what I had to do when I was head coach? I don't think you want Adam Gase within 50 miles of any team, not just the Miami Dolphins. That's all I'm saying here. Find a defensive coordinator who the players will like, the players will respect, because that's ultimately what you want to talk about. Dolphins culture, the new culture, right? If Mike McDaniel needs to learn from anybody, he should keep learning from Eric Spoelstra. Not in the sense that we need to do load management and all that stuff. I don't agree with that. I don't think that works in football. But as far as getting the players to buy into the scheme, to getting the players to buy into what it is that you are selling them, that's something that he can learn from Spoelstra. That's what I truly believe. Miami Heat coach Eric Spoelstra has made a career out of building up this Heat culture, this idea of all for one and one for all, and everybody has a role to play. And even though they don't necessarily get it all done in the regular season all the time, But there was a quote that I had seen not too long ago, and it's very profound considering the two teams and their situations. The Miami Heat always undersell but overperform. And that means that you don't expect a whole lot from them, but darn it, once they get to the playoffs, they're tougher to kill than crabgrass. And then in the Dolphins' case, they oversell and they ultimately underperform. It's always been that way, it feels like, for the past 20 years. So if Mike McDaniel will learn from anybody, let him keep learning from Spoelstra. He doesn't need to learn how to be a head coach. He doesn't. The players already like him. He already gets along with them very well. So what he needs to do, if anything, is just learn to just go with what's working and don't try to force something that is not. You don't want to run the football, Mike McDaniel? Too bad. It's working. It's just go with it. Do the thing that you don't want to do because you know that it's actually working. Buy into your own reputation, I guess I could say. Buy into your own reputation. And when it comes to the defensive coordinator position, Mike McDaniel needs to find somebody not only A, he gets along with, but B, the players are going to get along with. That is the culture that the Dolphins are going with right now. You cannot find somebody who's going to rub against the grain. You don't like the guy. You don't want to work with the guy. There were reports that Mike McDaniel and Vic Fangio barely ever stayed in the same room with each other. That's not a working formula. It's just not. Because if Vic Fangio is leaving when Mike McDaniel's coming and vice versa, well, then that's just a classic case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. It doesn't work. You need a defensive coordinator who works well with Mike McDaniel, who the players appreciate, who the players can get along with, who the players like, and is also willing to acknowledge that I have this kind of player. This player is saying, let me do this, and I'm very good at this. Watch me excel at doing this thing that I've done all my career. I'm looking at Jaylen Ramsey right now. If Jaylen Ramsey wants to work under Brandon Staley, I would listen. I don't necessarily like Brandon Staley, certainly not as a head coach. But you know what? For 1 year, and with a lot of talented players, which Miami has, by the way, he was able to lead the top defense in the NFL and win a Super Bowl under Sean McVay. You think that Mike McDaniel, if he can just learn from his mistakes and start running the football more, to start trying to create mismatches in ways that necessarily doesn't conform to what he's been doing for the past couple of years, learn from the mistake, find a defensive coordinator who the players will like, and let's see where the Dolphins go from there. That's going to be for this show. Thank you all so much for listening. Once again, make sure you go to prizepicks.com, use that promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your deposit when you sign up. And, of course, make sure that you go to the links in the description below for My Nintendo Store, and you'll be able to get bonus items upon making the purchases for those two games below, Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Super Mario RPG. We will see you all next time for another episode of Fins Nation.